Hey, what's up, everybody? Good morning. This is Game Logic from the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube, one of the co-hosts of the Enough to Keep Going weekly games podcast on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube, as well as frequent guest member or co-host on the Basement Radio Arcade podcast and the Damage Per Second podcast. Welcome back to another episode of Talking About Games. Talking About Games, or TAG, is my solo cast where I come on here and talk about games, the industry, news, financial things going on in the industry, state of technology, various hardware stories in PC gaming. So just kind of one of my waysides where I kind of get an opportunity to talk about the things that are most important to me to talk about, just because, you know, I've got other cast members and sometimes I don't get to go over all of the things that I personally want to go over. Yo, Innate in the chat, in the live stream. Appreciate you coming through early here on a Sunday morning. So a little discombobulated. It turns out as I was going live, I had to quickly edit the live stream announce, and I didn't have everything staged as far as news stories that I wanted to go over. So we are going to, first of all, put some music on in the background. So that kind of covers me when I need to take a drink of coffee, spot of an energy drink. But without much further ado, we are going to get straight to it. First news story in the rundown is Assassin's Creed Shadows pre-orders are solid, in line with Odyssey. And this is where I said I'm discombobulated because I don't have didn't have all this stuff ready to share to the stream. So let me get that for you. Okay, here we go. This will get me through the first three stories. I'm gonna have to give me some time to pull up the other links. This news story over on Push Square by KL Adam. Assassin's Creed Shadows pre-orders are solid, in line with Odyssey. Ubisoft says that pre-orders for its upcoming Assassin's Creed Shadows are solid. While specifics weren't forthcoming, they are currently in line with those of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, the second most successful entry of the franchise. I need to get the banner up there. Players who do pre-order will gain the Claws of Awaji expansion in the future, and the 10+ hour offering sounds pretty enticing. Speaking today, Ubisoft daimyo Yves Guillemot sounded quite optimistic about the company's prospects. I want to commend the incredible talent and dedication of the entire Assassin's Creed team, who are working tirelessly to ensure that Shadows delivers on the promise of what is the franchise's most ambitious entry yet. In parallel, we are progressing well on our cost reduction program. Of course, there's been much ado in out there in the gaming community and in the media about the delays associated with Assassin's Creed. Lots of certain factions of the gaming community responded poorly to the notion of Assassin's Creed Shadows due to it having a black protagonist and then having a female protagonist. A lot of that, I think, is foolishness and a lot of fear. But I don't think any of those things are impactful. I think the most pertinent thing to me is how this figures into the ongoing financial status of Ubisoft and the notion that it is out currently shopping itself for a sale, working with Tencent. Tencent's investment in the Guillemot holding company, which owns the shares in Ubisoft that are representative of the Guillemot family. I think a lot of the conventional belief right now is that this is do or die. Assassin's Creed Shadows is do or die for Ubisoft. And I'm not of that mindset. I don't know that it's do or die. I think it figures into the calculus of what does Ubisoft do and what does Ubisoft do in conjunction with Tencent. I think some of the possibilities are, I don't know that there's going to be an outright sale. Maybe, but I think when you look around the industry, when you look in particular at the console manufacturers, you look at who does that make sense for, and who has the money to make that purchase. I don't know that any of them are really on footing now where either of them would want to make that much of a reach. We're still kind of in recovery from the post-pandemic time. All of these companies are still in the throes of doing layoffs to make their financial health look better. So I don't know that now is the time to onboard several thousand more employees with the wide geographic dispersion that the Ubisoft studios do, as well as onboarding all of their network infrastructure, and then somehow merging that into current PlayStation or Xbox infrastructure. I think that would be a hard road to hoe. I think what's maybe more likely is that there's some shuffling of the deck with regards to their properties. And I don't know, but I wonder, will it look like Ubisoft keeping everything that's big and getting rid of the things that are small, or it being the other way, taking all of their stuff that's big and looking at shopping that out, because those are the things that, yes, have the biggest returns associated with them, but they're also the things that require the most people and have the biggest drag coefficient on making the business go. When you look at their big franchises, when you look at Assassin's Creed, when you even look at The Division and the notion that that offloading massive entertainment means also evaluating it in conjunction with the Snowdrop engine, which I think might be valuable for another publisher, or another venture that doesn't have, or another game publisher that doesn't have its own proprietary engine. Those things you could look at as things that could be sold off as standalones, that they would be attractive to someone, that somebody would look at that as a favorable opportunity for them to pick up without having all of the baggage associated with things like they're I can't remember the name of it, but they're like downhill like bike racing game, Riders Republic, or The Crew. But I mean, regardless, I think at the end of the day, I continue to always praise Ubisoft for sticking with all of their IP and constantly putting investment behind IPs that, to me, in some ways, sometimes don't make sense. Just because I still am flabbergasted by, you kill XDefiant, but you're still supporting Skull and Bones. Now, I've just accepted that must be because there's some financial metric associated with that I just don't have visibility on and don't see, and so it just doesn't make sense to me. But that to me is crazy. And I know XDefiant was expensive and it was a big drag on the business. So like there's optics like that, like I said, from the general consumer view, I don't see. But it's super interesting. I readily admit that I am an Ubisoft stan. I tend to like a lot of their franchises. I tend to enjoy playing their games. I'm a huge fan of The Division. I was very glad to see The Division 2 kind of break out and accelerate beyond what the original Division was. I love the Assassin's Creed franchise, so I have the highest hopes for these. I loved Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. So I have the highest hopes for Ubisoft and its properties and its studios to continue on and do well. We're just going to have to see how this comes out. We're going to move on to story number 2 in the docket. This news story over on Gamer Rant by Tyler Shipley. Hideki Kamiya wants Nintendo's Virtual Console to make a comeback. Hideki Kamiya has commented on Nintendo's Virtual Console, saying he wants to see the lineup of retro games become available for purchase on the Switch too. While the likelihood of the Virtual Console returning is somewhat slim, these comments from Kamiya suggest that demand for the classic model of obtaining older Nintendo games on the Switch 2 is present. That's a bit of a reach for me. The fact that one person wants the Virtual Console back doesn't necessarily constitute for me that there's great demand out there for the Virtual Console to come back. I think from a fandom perspective, lots of us I'm not on the Nintendo platform anymore, but I was, and all of us lamented the loss of the Virtual Console and the model that it kind of provided. Lots of us were frustrated with the typical Nintendo honey badger approach to the industry of, ripping the store away from us in conjunction with the hardware and saying, basically, if you want those games, you're going to have to buy them again. But as we often say, Nintendo going to do what Nintendo going to do. Debuting on the Wii in 2006, the Virtual Console provided a selection of classic games from older Nintendo platforms for players to purchase. Following its initial launch, the distribution model came to the 3DS and Wii U in 2011 and 2013, respectively. While not every game could be purchased through the Virtual Console, it provided a way for Nintendo fans to buy many titles from home consoles like the NES, Super NES, and N64, along with handhelds such as the Game Boy and GBA. Unfortunately, the Virtual Console was discontinued on the Wii, Wii U, and 3DS, leaving fans without a way of purchasing many of these classic titles, as I just mentioned. If you don't know Hideki Kamiya, he is a former Capcom employee and then was at Platinum Games. His name has been associated with the recent brain drain that's been occurring at Platinum Games of very senior level directors, creative directors, and producers who have abandoned ship. Some of them have gone onto other studios. Some of them have joined studios that are being led by other prominent creatives in the industry. Kamiya has started his own studio. He has also been associated, when he was at Capcom, with a lot of the direction of the Resident Evil series, as well as Okami. Obviously, Okami 2 is being worked on now. That is actually being done by his studio through a publishing deal with Capcom. So that's kind of a neat little bit of serendipity, as the original creator associated with the title is able to re-engage on that title, even though he's not a current employee of the company, right, by starting his own studio and making a publishing deal. So obviously lots of excitement for Okami 2. Should the Virtual Console come back? I mean, yes. I mean, the thing should have had continuity across the remainder of Nintendo's platforms forward. It should have never just been abandoned. Like I said, it was a very frustrating thing to collect all those titles on the Wii and the 3DS for me, and then just have no real way of getting back to them in terms of retaining a digital license to them that wasn't associated with your Nintendo Switch Online subscription. It's good, obviously, that Switch Online has continued to flower out and become as robust as it has. It's been great to hear that there's going to be continuity from that on the Switch to the Switch 2. Will this maintain and propagate forward, I think is the key question. In the mobile space, while I have flipped back and forth between Android and the Apple ecosystem, and at times, at various points with both of those, chosen to just dip out. What's been nice is that even though you might abandon all of your iOS apps for a time, if you drop your iPhone but keep an iPad, you can still get to them. If you drop your iPhone and your iPad and then eventually come back to them, all of your content is still there. It was enjoyable for me when I dropped the Xbox, but then all of the videos that I had purchased through the Xbox Store were available on PC. So that type of continuity of access to content as you purchase it or purchase a license to it is always appreciated. Nintendo has the unique ability to handle things the way that it does with its consumer base, but but the notion of the problem with Switch Online is obviously is the moment you drop your subscription, you then don't have access to that content. So that's not as optimal as the notion of the Virtual Console was. But again, that would have been best for the Virtual Console had there been continuity on carrying that license forward, and we didn't have that. So not sure where this is going to go. I don't suspect that the Virtual Console is going to come back. I think Nintendo is firmly on the path of this subscription service. The best thing about the subscription service is when I still kind of refer to them as Virtual Consoles, so forgive me, but when the NES, the Super NES, the N64, even the Sega arcade emulation came through Nintendo Switch Online. The problem was we just didn't know whether or not it was going to continue to expand, and so we definitely gave it kind of the hairy eyeball when it initially dropped, because it was like, well, they want to charge us this much for it, but there's no promise that they're going to continue building those libraries out. It's been very fortunate to see them continue to invest in that. It's been very fortunate to see them continue to expand on the total number of titles that are available. Still to this date, I don't think that they've ever said anything that tells us that I'm sorry, I'm horrible about banners for people who don't watch the live show and come through here. As far as I know, I don't think that they've still ever made like a programmatic commitment to, hey, sign up to this subscription service and we're going to continue to expand on it. It's not like Game Pass, where Game Pass says you're going to subscribe to the service and you're going to have access to the stuff that's in there now, and then we're going to continue to add to it and revolve stuff, in and out of the store, so you constantly have access to new stuff. Even PlayStation says that, to a certain extent, you have, an expectation that things with a lag, a much more significant lag, obviously, than Game Pass, are going to continue to evolve into the store. But with Nintendo, as far as its back catalog, you're kind of up to their whim, and you're kind of holding on to the notion that they have a commitment to kind of the silent promise that they've made. I do expect that to continue. I don't expect the Virtual Console to come back. It's a novel idea. Obviously have the utmost respect for Hideki Kamiya, but this is a nice thing to wish and to want for. Let's go on to the third story. Then I'm going to take a bit of a break because I need to bring the other stories up, but I also need to grab some coffee. Okay, Embracer sales dropped 22% to $1.5 billion. $298 million in debt remains. This news story over on GameIndustry.biz by Sophie McAvoy. Embracer Group has published its financial results for the 9 months ending December 31st, 2024, reporting declines across its PC, console, and mobile segments. However, it experienced a net profit during its third quarter, following the completed spin-off of tabletop publisher Asmodee. Here's what you need to know. The numbers: net sales, and I think, these are in Dutch krona, I think, if I remember where Embracer is corporately out of. We'll just read the dollars, since fortunately GameIndustry.biz provided those. Net sales of $680 million, down 3% year on year, including PC console games, where they scored $242 million, down 23% year on year, and mobile games, $149 million, up 2% year on year. Their net profit was $89 million, compared to a net loss of $167 million during the same period last year. So on an overall upward trajectory, but still in the red overall. For the 9 months ending December 31st, 2024. So this is their financial year to date. $1.5 billion, down 22% year on year, which includes $679 million in PC console game sales, which is down 35%, and $409 million in mobile games, down 3% year on year, totaling up to a net loss of $121 million compared to a net loss of $130 million during the same period last year. So a lot of these financials read very much kind of like the Warner Brothers financials do. Keep getting confused by the mouse that's on my screen versus the mouse that's in StreamYard. Where there's red to recover, right? And so for some number of years and reporting periods, you're going to get overall negative results, right? but the effort that they're engaged in is to burn down how far behind on that. I think. Well, I guess it's still Warner Brothers. That's the story you hear too with the Warner Brothers gaming division, right? That has Suicide Squad, and so they're behind. Their commitment to their investors is to recover that and eventually turn to the black, but that's gonna take some number of years. Innate says in the chat, "Yeah, I wish Nintendo would just sell me Golden Sun." This is in response to the last story, as well as the GBA and DS 3DS Fire Emblem with all the DLC built in. Since my 3DS ever fully does I think he means does crap out, then I'm as well. Yeah. That's the unfortunate thing, is that there's so many of those things that are imprisoned on the hardware. So back to Embracer. Obviously, Embracer involved in a very aggressive restructuring plan, closing studios, laying people off. That's still going to continue. I'm not sure if they've said that they're done with the 9 months restructuring program, but closures of Volition Games, Free Radical Design, Campfire Cabal, Saber, and the sale of Saber Interactive and Gearbox. Gearbox obviously over at 2K now, readying to drop Borderlands 4 in late September. Yeah, obviously, I don't think that this evolution is complete. I think the big thing is, and the success story, obviously, in here is also, I think these guys is Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, which has reached 1 million players in 24 hours and had over 250,000 concurrent players on Steam. I think the interesting evolution to watch here at Embracer is eventually they're going to get through all of the shuffling of the deck. The other thing that goes along with that is where are they going with IP? And the commitment has been that they're going to double down on big properties, like their license to Middle Earth properties. And that pivot is what's going to be interesting to see, because they're still in the process of, as far as I can tell, kind of flushing the production pipeline. I haven't really gotten a sense that they've really embarked firmly on the path forward with the new IP. Embracer has been around for an incredibly long time in some form or structure by Lars Wingefors, who started this whole endeavor, I think, when he was like 16. So I don't think that they're going anywhere. And obviously they have a big chunk of their capital base that is formed by THQ, which has been this cobbled together reassemblage of what the old THQ was, as well as extending with some new stuff, new properties, new studios. I don't think. It's kind of amazing that it hasn't disintegrated into a THQ kind of situation where they went bankrupt and had to auction off everything and auction off all their IP. So it's interesting that they were able to find, cash infusions and investors and keep things going. I guess a question for me for, the gaming community and people with optics on this is Embracer spent a good year, probably long. Definitely a good year before the unravelment really started, kind of being the joke of the industry. I maybe don't want to say joke, but just kind of setting off constant alarms about their approach and their strategy and the likelihood of failure. And then when it did fail, constantly getting a black eye, comments, being made the butt of a joke by Greg Miller at not this year's DICE Awards, but last year's DICE Awards. Have they recovered from that, and are they moving forward? That I don't know. I think in one previous episode of talking about games, that at the end of the day, I don't know that gamers really love publishers so much as studios. There are some exceptions to that, but I don't know that Embracer is one that you necessarily really even think about as like whether you like the publisher or not. You do based on their business impact. I don't think people associate Embracer with particular properties or IP or game titles. So they're just this kind of ambiguous shadow organization that's in the background that we only really pay attention to when we hear that they've sparkled something up in terms of finances, and they have to lay people off. I guess the important thing, obviously, is that their studios are able to remain solvent and are able to move forward, and that there is some positive out of this as they reorient them to the IPs that they're going to chase, and that as they do that, that doesn't become like a crunch factory, right? That there doesn't become this corporate mandate to put people on ridiculous schedules, and overpromise things that they could never possibly deliver on completely ludicrous timelines. That is a part that remains to be seen from a leadership perspective, because we pay attention to, when we see the Vince Zampellas rise to prominence and, take over the Battlefield series, and, when the COD general manager swaps out and becomes someone new. I guess one other, I think we were talking about a story today where Minecraft has had a change of leadership. So I guess one of the things also that's kind of in the back of my mind with regards to this is we haven't really heard who's going to helm that whole thing. Like if Middle Earth is going to become like the big Bonga property, and it's going to have this kind of Call of Duty light assembly of multiple studios that have to be coordinated, and where there's trade-offs and dependencies across these multiple studios who are geographically separated, but have to work together to pull off this really big property. Then I can only imagine, based on the size that they talk about, it's going to have to be some kind of big AAA thing, right? So warning bells there again in terms of budget and complexity. I haven't heard yet who's really going to helm that, and I what I instinctively feel is that shouldn't be somebody who's at Embracer now, right? So I can't remember. There was one name. I can't remember if Carmack was working with Embracer, or I thought there was one previous creative director who was working with Deep Silver on like a first-person shooter property. Maybe it was Romero. I can't remember. I can remember the show and that person coming up on the screen and there being a discussion about that. So I'll have to dig into that later. But I feel like some type of magnetic personality who is known throughout the industry and has the chops to pull off something that big needs to be brought in to wrangle all of those studios. And so it'll be interesting to hear if that happens. But I haven't seen indications of that yet. So give me a couple minutes to bring the other stories up, 30 seconds or so, and also get a drink of coffee. I have mentioned in the past on the show that I do have to take breaks because it's just me. Hey, what's up, Hero Down Under? Thanks so much for joining on the chat. We appreciate you. Okay, yeah, Hero Down Under is obviously in Australia, so he's on an alternative timeline. So this may not be a good time for him. Woo, it's almost 1 a.m. on Monday. I get you. That is about the time that I'm doing a lot of my gaming. So I appreciate you. But I would be the same. I wouldn't be able to stick with a podcast going on at that time. So like I said, let me bring these other news stories up. Okay, next news story in the rundown. This news story over on Shack News by Donovan Erskine. Joseph Fares says Ubisoft should make a co-op Splinter Cell game. During a recent trip to Los Angeles, I sat down with Joseph Fares, founder of Hazelight Studios, who has the upcoming game Split Fiction, which I think a lot of us are looking forward to talk about his team's upcoming game Split Fiction while discussing his passion for co-op games. Fares spoke to the lack of love the genre gets from major studios. He specifically named Ubisoft, saying that the studio should look to make a co-op game based on Splinter Cell. Following my previous Split Fiction, I was speaking with Joseph Fares about the success of Hazelight's last 2 co-op titles, It Takes Two, A Way Out, and how they haven't inspired any major studios to try their hands at big-budget co-op focused games. When he mentioned the ongoing struggles at Ubisoft, and his quote, Joseph Fares' quote is, "Ubisoft is struggling now. Why the F aren't they talking Sam Fisher and doing split screen only? Don't chicken out and do single player. Just say, this is split screen only. Boom, that's it. You have a success. That's a guaranteed success for them. That idea is for you, Ubisoft. You can have it for free." So obviously, Joseph, a very flamboyant personality in the gaming industry. I appreciate his perspective. I have been fine with his appearances on the TGAs. Some of my mutuals don't agree with me, and that's fine. This isn't so much as a news story as a sentiment. I don't expect Ubisoft to take off with this idea and go run with it. Obviously, even while I have the utmost respect for Joseph Fares, I have kind of the same response that I have for gamers when they say things like this. It's a matter of juice versus the squeeze. It's a matter of what is the investment cost, what is the LOE, and what is the likely ROI. Would a game like this sell well? Probably. But we also have to acknowledge the constraints that a required co-op game puts on the addressable market, right? That needs people who have friends. To put it mildly, I mentioned the other night on the other show, I haven't played any of these games because I don't have friends. And I say that jokingly. It's not that I don't have friends. It's that I don't have friends who have schedules that sync with mine, where their availability mates well with my own lifestyle, right? Like I just mentioned, A Hero Down Under. I am often playing games at 11. Sometimes I don't get started gaming until 11 o'clock at night. 11:30, midnight, and then I'm playing games from midnight to 2. And people, do you have friends in your time zone? Do you have friends on that same type of schedule? The games have been wonderful, and the games have performed well, and his games have achieved a ton of critical accolades and awards. So there's absolutely no question about that. But another big part of that is, though, a lot of those games have had this business model where he doesn't require you to buy 2 copies in order to play the game with your friend. I would not expect Ubisoft to utilize that business model. If Ubisoft does a Splinter Cell game, they're going to require you to buy 2 copies. And so the question then becomes, well, how does that fare on the market, and what is the market response to that? Market response to that is probably the market doesn't consume that in the same numbers that it may have done the Hazelight Studio games. And obviously the production costs that would be required for a Splinter Cell game would be higher, because the expectations for that IP would be higher. I do not know that you're going to pull off an Assassin's Creed Mirage whenever you drop the next Splinter Cell, and then also have it be coupled to the baggage of being a co-op required game. Maybe you could. I mean, that would probably be the way to do it with the highest hope of success. It's to try and make it like an AC Mirage, where it didn't have all the graphical fidelity, and it had limited scope, and it wasn't some huge game. That would also be a tough thing to stick the landing on, because I don't think for a co-op game anybody wants to play that for like 40 hours. So that needs to be something along the lines of a 12 to 18-hour game. I feel like, low 20s at the most. So those would be difficult waters to navigate, and a lot of calculus to run to try and figure out how to best to stick the landing on that. I don't expect, like I said, that Ubisoft's going to embark on that type of journey, especially right now when they have so much uncertainty and ambiguity on what their immediate financial outlook in the future looks like. But I thought the story was interesting, and I thought the notion was interesting. So let's go on to, I think this is story number 5 in the rundown. I'll try and get that up on the screen. This news story also over on Shack News by TJ Denzer. Head of Mojang Studios, Asa Breeden, resigns as Microsoft Gaming VP, fills role, and I talked about this a little bit earlier in the show in terms of personalities and executives that you have in big positions leading big IP. Paul's Gaming Live. Thank you very much for swinging through the live stream. One of the Splinter Cell games had co-op, did it not? I believe so. I did not play a ton of the Splinter Cell games. I find them thoroughly frustrating. I played the first one, I think. I do believe it had co-op, but what I'm saying here is a game that is in a dedicated co-op mode, right, where you always have to have another person to play with. And the type of constraint that has on the marketability of that kind of game. It's a normal time for me once. Okay, very cool. Thanks a lot, Paul. It's good to know that this time works well for you. It works well for me too. Sometimes before I have a lot of obligations that flare up on the weekend. Not feasible all the time, but good to know that it's an option that works for you. Because that may lead me to doing more shows like this at this time in the morning. Big changes are happening in the management at Minecraft developer Mojang Studios this week. It's been reported that head of Mojang Studios, Asa Breeden, is leaving her position to focus on personal pursuits. In her place, Microsoft Gaming VP Kayleen Walters will step into the role and take over as head of Mojang. Asa Breeden herself shared word of her exit from Mojang Studios on her LinkedIn profile. Breeden had been in the role for a little under a year and a half and had been at Mojang for about 3.5 years. That said, Breeden expressed that she would like to pursue personal projects and is moving on from the studio to do that. I'm just going to trying to scan her letter to see if there's anything revealing in that. I don't think there is. As for what's next, I will be around to ensure a smooth handover before taking some time to catch up with friends, build new connections, and see what adventures the future holds. But I will always be cheering this team on from the sidelines, decide to see where you take things next. This isn't a goodbye. It's just a respawn. So the thing that is curious to me in kind of how this has developed is I've talked on other shows in the past about how there is such a attention to detail, right, in terms of at large corporations in terms of succession planning. That typically, next in line is identified. They're identified well in advance, and then there are deliberate efforts to make sure that they are fed assignments to help groom them into that position, so that they know what to do when they are in that seat. This does not appear to be that, and that obviously could be a lot of different things. It could be health. It could be the health of a family member. It could be a move associated with a spouse. It could be tons of things. It could be exhaustion. It could be, I'm just tired of it. It could be, syncing with new management. Obviously, Xbox has made a ton of strategic shifts this year. And obviously there's different dialogues that are happening with the studios. So it could be that. I don't know. And I certainly wouldn't be here, rattling a voodoo stick that this is indications of anything like being problematic or major going badly at Xbox. What I will say is it doesn't sound pre-planned. It doesn't sound deliberate and conscious. It sounds like it is something that developed rather quickly. And that is by virtue of the fact that a gaming VP who obviously has other responsibilities is stepping directly into the role of assuming leadership of a studio. Now, what I would hope and think is that that's an interim fix, and that will be addressed. Maybe they just didn't know who they would want next in line. It also often happens that you have succession planning and you do have a plan next in line, but then like when that opportunity comes up, that next in line, right, isn't willing to do it, right, or can't do it, again because of their own health or a family member's health or a move associated with the spouse, right? So sometimes even the best laid plans, right, they wind up unraveling. What does this mean for the IP? I don't think it means anything. Like, I mean, Minecraft is as stable a property as I could ever imagine. It does its thing. It does its thing on the market. It does its thing with its consumer base. As far as I know, and I'm not in the Minecraft community, so somebody who is could let me know. I don't know or get the sense that the Minecraft community is saber rattling for like anything major or change. It's not like the Destiny community, right? Or who's constantly unhappy with changes that are implemented, or are the oldest vanguards in the Fortnite community or even the Call of Duty community or even the Halo community, right? Who take these religious stances and stand on a square that a given change is just absolutely like you know, dogmatically against, right, the thesis or ethos of that property. So I don't get that sense. I also don't know where Minecraft goes from here. Like it's on every platform. So my guess is it just needs to continue to do its thing. And that might also be part of the reason for Kayleen stepping in directly, is because there's no rush, there's no emergency, there's no crisis, right, requiring that hole to be filled right away. Paul's Gaming Live says, I wonder what numbers the movie pulls. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the last news story before we get into the discussion topic. Okay, Micro Center lists GeForce RTX 5070 Ti, and gamers won't like pricing. This news story by Paul Lilly over on Hot Hardware. Try and blow that up a little. Come on, Apple. Okay. Several early listings for custom GeForce RTX 5070 Ti models from NVIDIA's hardware partners have popped up at Micro Center, and spoiler alert, almost every single one so far is priced higher than the baseline $749 MSRP. The lone exception is a factory overclocked PNY GeForce RTX 5070 Ti that's listed at $750. So technically, they say it's $1 over, but MSRP is always, you know, some ending in 9, so I don't think that's really the thing. While all of the others range from 20% to 35% over MSRP. There are a couple of reasons why this matters. For one, NVIDIA is not offering the GeForce RTX 5070 Ti in Founders Edition form. Without any FE model in sight, the onus is on NVIDIA's hardware partners to optionally offer any custom variants at NVIDIA's baseline MSRP. Out of a dozen models that are listed at Micro Center right now, only one has chosen to do that. So I don't agree with that perspective. What I actually think your expectation should be is, because there's no Founders Edition, MSRP doesn't really necessarily mean a lot. Like, there is probably not going to be any card for a very long time that is a 5070 Ti that is at MSRP, because all of them are going to be AIBs and all of them are going to be customs from third-party vendors. So until this thing is out on the market long enough that prices start to float down, sales start to abund, and there are discounts, and there's some savings, right, of getting those chips to the AIB integrators, you're not going to see the price come down. So as long as NVIDIA continues to sell the chips at whatever price it's selling to the vendors, you're probably not going to see many of these land at 750. Like this article says, you may see the one-offs from some vendors who tend to be particularly price friendly. But I would also say, in this age where we see things like a board come out that runs notably cheaper than others, it's good to really dig into the details of what's going on with that board and make sure it's not like radically underclocked and it's not made by, you know, I would call it the equivalent of bin chips, or there's not something weird with it, like a reduced bus from like the baseline, or there were variants of like that came out in the 4000 series generation. So I would just, you know, do your homework. Let's see what comments we have. Paul's Gaming Live. I know I am in the market for a new card. 5070 Ti or 9070 XT are the targets right now. And the Nate says, might be a while, Paul. Yeah. I mean, I have my own feelings about the RTX 5000 series. The rubric I've been trying to recently apply, which has not always been my rubric, is targeting things that give me a 30% lift over any board that I have in a box for 1440p ultra settings. Right now, like, the only board I have that even has a SKU on the market that achieves that is actually this box, I think, that's right behind me, that has an RTX 3070 Ti in it, where I think an RTX 4080 will give it a 30% lift at 1440p ultra. So, I mean, I'm not in any personal rush to get into the 5000 series generation. I think most of my focus now is on, I mean, that box has AMD Ryzen 5700X in it. And so most of my focus is on anywhere where I need to do what I call a foundational upgrade, which means upgrade, you know, the case, power supply, motherboard, processor, an AIO, so that when I do put a new card in that box, it doesn't bottleneck the new GPU. I personally think I've got some time to float. I would also maybe consider, for people who are thinking, depending on how old the card is, like if you're on an RTX 2000 series, I can definitely understand being interested in the 5000 right now. But as I constantly mention, there's a huge amount of room between the 5080 and the 5090. That to me telegraphs that obviously NVIDIA is going to fill that in, and they're leaving that space there deliberately. And so we're going to get 5080 Ti's, 5080 Supers, 5080 Super Ti's. And if in somewhere in the bandwidth between like $1,000 and $1,500, if that is still above where you're thinking about investing, like I said, hopefully as those come in, then you will start to see price depressions on the lower SKUs. And so that is a point where I would expect the 5070 Ti prices for the AIBs to start tamping down and getting more in line with MSRP. Let's see what other comments we have. Paul says, I think it will be easy to get a 9070 XT. I just want to see the output from FSR 4. Also says, I'm coming from a 3000 series card, so I will get a massive boost. And he mentions, we can hope that's the case, Paul, because the GPU market is a mess right now. Yeah, I mean, well, it's interesting, Paul. I mean, so I've been wailing and gnashing teeth too over possibly going back to the AMD route. I know my threshold for this tripwire is probably much more taut than it is for other gamers. But just when I had my 5700 XTs and then a 6700 XT, I went back and forth between having them in Windows boxes and then refragging that Windows box to Linux. And I enjoyed the time that I had on Linux, but I also felt like I wasn't getting the maximum performance out of it in small percentages, right, that I would get on a Windows box. And then when I moved it to Windows, like I get the perspective that some people might have that, hey, all you have to do is DDU, boot into safe mode, DDU your drivers, wipe everything, and then reinstall to get around that whole thing of Windows trying to slipstream you new AMD Adrenalin build-in drivers, and that causing conflicts within your box. But that, and I do, I try to be a content creator, so that in conjunction with my experience with Radeon chips was that they didn't do what I needed them to do from a content creation perspective. They weren't great for live streaming. They weren't great for capturing video. I had to do a lot more kind of tweaking and balancing the performance profile of the game to get the card to do well, which I tend to not have to do with NVIDIA boards, mainly because of the tensor cores. So at the end of the day, I just decided, look, I'm not going to boot into safe mode to DDU my drivers to keep this Radeon card growing in my Windows box when it doesn't do what I needed to do from a content creation perspective. So that's just me. But yeah, I at some point, maybe on Twitter or something, we can go some back and forth. I definitely want the perspective of somebody who I feel like will be honest with me about the Radeon experience in a Windows box. I feel there's a lot of disingenuity out there in the social media space where lots of people on Radeons kind of shrug their shoulders and say, I've been using a Radeon card for 30 years and I've never had a problem. And I'm like, I don't believe that for 1 second, because I had problems, and I wonder if it's this bubble of, because they are problems that they've become accustomed to and they're normal and routine for them, they don't see that as a bother. But then I go, but you do understand that what you're doing is not what NVIDIA people have to do, right? And that makes a difference to some. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Paul's Giving Live says, yeah, my last experience with AMD was awful on the 6700 XT, right? And that's the one I had, and I kept in this whole thing of like configuring your box to take yourself out of the update ring on Windows, so you never get updates or don't get driver updates. I mean, yes, that's a thing you can do, but many is the day that I don't want to be bothered, right, doing that. So. But for people who are willing to do it, absolutely a viable experience. And one of the reasons I still, after all my pain, still consider going back is because of the price savings, of the cost savings to get performance, especially in terms of raster, right? And especially in terms of memory. NVIDIA is super stingy with VRAM, and it frustrates me to no end. So I mean, it's a viable alternative. I just haven't brought myself around to going back. Okay, let me get one spot of coffee because this next segment is going to be chunky as we talk about. Screw that up. The state of Xbox and PlayStation first party. Does it matter? Should it matter? And are those two different questions? So I'll be right back with you guys in 1 second. Okay, so I definitely, Nate, Paul, anybody else in the chat, I definitely invite input and alternative perspectives on this. I don't know if I have this fully like threaded so it flows well. It's one of the reasons I came in late. I needed to do a little bit of a cleanup and how I have this thing written out, but we'll try and get into it. So there's obviously been a lot of Sturm and Drang and a lot of hand wringing and agonizing over the notion of the state of PlayStation first party. This goes back to the showcase and the sessions that have been going on for multiple years about like the remasters and the remakes and yada yada yada. And some of this obviously is just a genuine commentary from extreme Xbox fans who kind of always want to contrive that like everything that is a negative at PlayStation is some indicator of some massive crisis. By the same token, PlayStation people do the same thing. I often have this problem with PlayStation people that they contrive everything to be like Xbox does nothing well, and make an effort to take every chip off the table with regards to Xbox, and I think that is way overly as well. So the questions start with, should first party games matter, and do first party games matter? And the first part of the thread is, when we ask those questions, are those questions synonymous with the discussion on exclusives? Because there's been a lot of discussion this generation about exclusives. A lot of pundits, taking this position that there should be no more exclusives, that every game belongs on every single platform. I mentioned on Twitter that I find that interesting and maybe would question whether or not some of those takes are hypocritical, because Avowed isn't on every platform day and date, and there's been very little discussion from that corner of punditry on that topic. So to me, first of all, no, it's not. And so what I want to do is I want to pull apart and separate this notion of the discussion of exclusives and the discussion of first party. So to me, obviously now, first party and exclusives are not necessarily synonymous. There's overlap. It's a Venn diagram, clearly. But obviously Xbox is sending its first party games to PlayStation. And so those games are not exclusives. So therefore, those two terms can't be considered synonymous. And by the same token, PlayStation, the hardware, continues to be the only place you can play first party games day and date, unless it is a live service multiplayer game. And at this point, I will also inject, we need to stop the discourse where we treat those the same. So multiplayer live service games, where we talk about those in the same breath as story-driven, deep narrative, high cinematic production style content. We get a lot of comments that are like, hey, see, PlayStation, you sent Helldivers 2 to PC and PlayStation day and date. Therefore, that proves that it can work. You should keep doing it. Totally stating by the notion that a multiplayer live service game is a radically different piece of IP, right, on the market, and the market that it addresses, than their typical high cinematic production style content. So those things are not the same. They do not achieve the same OKRs for the PlayStation business unit at a strategic level. And multiplayer live service games being day and date makes sense, because those games live or die on the strength of their daily concurrent user base. And so widening that pool as much as feasible in terms of the addressable market and people who can get in on that game, as much as feasible, like I said, while maintaining competitive differentiation. In other words, PlayStation ain't about to put those games on Xbox, right? Is key to a multiplayer live service strategy. PlayStation continues to secure third-party exclusives, and maybe even more impactful is the fact that we see developers and publishers who are making conscious choices to skip Xbox due to the competitive nature of Game Pass, as well as the additional LOE required to optimize for the Series S in the face of circumspect ROI. So again, none of those are like mic drop spiking the football statements. I've iterated in multiple past weeks that this notion that anything is a silver bullet, or that anything that people constantly say, see this worked once, so therefore if you do just this one thing, it means it will be successful. I had a ton of pushback with people on the Concord topic that, see, if you just made it free to play, it would succeed. No, like, the problem with Concord was not simply a matter of it being a paid game. There were multiple problems with Concord, not all of which I necessarily even agree with or can even see, but clearly, like, things in general, things in the software industry, things in software development, and it's a software engineering term that we wave as a mantra, like, there is no silver bullet. Like, you can't just give me more staff and therefore I can achieve schedule, right? It doesn't work that way. The same is true in business. Like, you're typically not gonna tweak this one thing and then make the difference between something being successful or something being a failure. NA says, I agree 100% logic. People are trying to make them seem like they are the same because we know what they want at the end of the day is all day and date, which would kill PlayStation as we know it. Paul's Gaming says, gaming for over 40 years, and honestly, without first-party exclusive games, you lose competition. They're Halo products for the hardware. Yeah, and so we're going to talk about that a little bit too, Paul. So at any rate, I think for the time being, I've built this initial tenet of the hypothesis that first-party and exclusives are not necessarily synonymous. So going on to part two, from a hardcore fandom perspective, neither publisher has really had the output desire for its primary console over the course of this generation. Xbox limped up to the starting line at the start of the generation and then had such an abysmal 2022 that they had to do a summer apology showcase when they announced a 12-month plan, which once again, Phil had to do a mea culpa for in 2023 when they failed to deliver on it in conjunction with the Redfall debacle. While Sony got off to a good jump start. I may have that timeline a little mixed up. So I think it's 2022 was the bathtub, 2023 then they had Redfall, and I think maybe the 12-month plan. The 12-month plan was summer of 2023. So the apology showcase was really more of an apology road show, which they had to do to kind of recover goodwill after the Redfall thing. By the same token, while Sony got off to a good jump start out of the gate at the beginning of the generation, the output of its first-party studios has dwindled to a trickle as the clock cycles consumed by chasing their live service initiative, and a pipeline full of remasters and remakes has finally caught up to them and tackled them at the shoestrings. Ineate's comment, yes, the apology showcase was wild. So again, both of these corporations have had problems with their production pipeline. One had them very early at the beginning of the generation. One is having them now in the middle of the generation. What I would say with regards to PlayStation is where they got tackled, though, is still somewhere in their opposing team's red zone, right? They are still knocking on the door of making a touchdown. And I say that because the consoles continue to sell. They continue to sell well, ahead of the curve set even by PlayStation 4. And they continue to ingratiate themselves to new gamers entering the fold who make the deliberate decision to go PlayStation. So when you look at their last quarter financials, the announcement that 42% of their sales were onboarding, new gamers into the space and onto the PlayStation Network, clearly there are consumers who are making that classic decision and choice between PlayStation or Xbox and are choosing PlayStation. And so if Sony's first-party output is so concerning, and I shouldn't have written that way. And so if Sony's first-party output is so concerning and their states of play are such a whiff, then why do people continue to buy the console? That to me is the question that should be asked. This whole matter of, Sony's failing because of its first party output, like, it needs to be load balanced with a more investigative question of, okay, then why are people continuing to still buy the console? And if people are still continuing to buy the console, should there be concern about their first party output? Is that concern trolling? So part of the answer to that is the mainstream consumer simply doesn't care. So this hyper concern about the current PlayStation tradecraft and managing its production pipeline is simply only the concern of the 7% of us from the market who are also on Twitter and on YouTube. So I'll bring Paul's comment in. PlayStation has a worldwide mindshare. Xbox has never been able to crack the market outside of the US, UK, and Australia. Yeah, and I think my logic is tracking along with yours, Paul. The other part of the answer to that question is that it is concerning, but PlayStation, and I think this is kind of exactly what you said, Paul, PlayStation has built up enough brand equity with the mainstream consumer and those of us online to be able to ride through this period of adversity. So a question for you guys is, why did I include the 7% of us that are both in the worry wart category, but also in the brand confidence category? And I say that because it's a matter of thresholds. Because when the Luddites, the new gamers, go to the 7% of us to ask for recommendations because they're getting into gaming or they've got a kid who's getting into gaming, the bulk of us, the bulk of that 7%, has still not hit an inflection point, a threshold tip over, where we're flipping to the position of telling them they should go get an Xbox over PlayStation. E-Nate mentions, yeah, PlayStation isn't pushing the roadmap via a great showcase the way I like. However, what's been delivered has been great and had rare stagnation. And so I'm swamped with games to play regardless. Yeah, and so that's another part of the consideration, right? Is Xbox recovering in terms of how it manages its production pipeline? Yes. In fact, 3 years ago, I ran calculations that I posted on Twitter where I talked about, when companies were acquired, when I expected their production pipelines to be flushed of the projects that they already had in motion at the point of acquisition, when I looked for there to be a reset, when I looked for in the timeline for there to be consolidation of support services and common consumption across all of the studios, and then when I would expect those studios to kind of be realigned in a new production pipeline battle rhythm that would allow them to achieve the production output quantification that I think they need to actually feed their subscription service. And my prediction was 2025. I said the most optimistic outlook is the end of 2024, but 2025 is the best outlook when everything will be flushed, everything will be behind them. Any drag coefficients that they had coming out of post-pandemic should be resolved, and that's where they are. I agree with you, Nate. Right, part of the reasoning, part of the causality behind the thing that I just mentioned, which is, are the bulk of the 7% of us telling people go buy an Xbox versus go buy a PlayStation? And the answer is no. And part of that is attributed to PlayStation got out of the gate on time at the beginning of the generation. The things that they have dropped as a result of that are seen in a positive light, have sold well, have garnered critical awards, have garnered good review scores. And so when we look at the deliverables and what's actually come out of the pipeline, we say, hey, yeah, PlayStation's having some problems now, but given their performance to date, we would expect that to be addressed and for them to return to form as you move forward. The Xbox stuff, and again, this is going to be a matter of the individual gamer. I'm talking about it in aggregate from the data that I see. Starfield, Forza Motorsport, Redfall, obviously, didn't stick the landing. Starfield, from in terms of review scores and awards, hasn't garnered a ton of accolades. When you look at its user community uptake on Steam, not good. Same thing for Forza Motorsport. For my personal feeling for Forza Motorsport, that game is not at the level of acumen that they have displayed with previous iterations of Forza Motorsport. I'm overall disappointed by the game. I don't think I've even bought a copy. I think when I played it, I just played it on Game Pass, and I have been a hardcore Forza Motorsport fan. I have bought every previous edition. I've always immediately bought the Ultimate Edition and gotten all of gotten the VIP pass and all the car packs and yada yada yada. I did not play it that way with Forza Motorsport. And so when you look at their output, right, it's a mix of things that didn't do quite as well as people would have hoped, but also the things that are good just aren't just don't have that gravitas, right? Paul's Gaming mentioned, Mindshare. What I talk about is the way that PlayStation is a fashion brand. Just hasn't held the attention of the gaming community and the market in that way. I talked in Brap's episode this week. I have the greatest accolades to shower on Obsidian. I still assert and will always assert that they were the best pickup by Xbox in the series of acquisitions that it's made. They are old reliable. They are consistent. You could be salty about Avowed. but my feeling is Avowed has done exactly what it needs to do. It stuck the landing. It's a consistent title. It has problems and it's imperfect, but I mean, so is everything that Bethesda does, and Bethesda gets heaps of accolades showered upon it. Along with Todd Howard, often had a problem with the niche Bethesda fan base before they were acquired by Xbox. So I will always give greater accolades to Obsidian than I will to Bethesda, probably. But the problem is, Grounded in Pentiment just didn't occupy, as Paul said, that mind share, right? Just didn't bring like the fashion brandness to Xbox, despite the fact that those are probably good games. Tango Gameworks, right? We could say everything that we want to say about Hi-Fi Rush and how good of a game it was, but clearly the financial performance metrics associated with that game weren't of sufficient nature to prevent Xbox from closing that studio. Again, that is the I often talk to my employees at work about PIE, perception, image, and exposure, right? That is the resultant perception and image that people have about the Xbox brand from the exposure of its games on the market. I think it should be patently obvious that is clearly in significant disparity to the way people have the perception and image based on the exposure of PlayStation titles. So I think that is part of the reason of the causality of why PlayStation continues to ride through this bathtub in a way that is starkly different than when Xbox hit its bathtub. When Xbox hit its bathtub, the end result is people defected and they went over the console. And that's a key part of this calculus as well. If we look at PlayStation, we say they have a current problem with production output. The problem is what is the alternative? You have a demographic of people who want to play high-end games with great graphical fidelity, but don't want to expend the money to go to PC. They're not going to go downstream and go to the Nintendo Switch. 60% of them already own a Nintendo Switch. So the alternatives are PlayStation and Xbox. And so, again, right, the comparison is, hey, yeah, they have a problem now, but tons of stuff that they put out have been great. They're still getting third-party exclusives, right, to fill in the gaps when they don't have first-party stuff. When you look at Xbox, you're still looking at potential and hopes and dreams. Now, I will admit, those potential and hopes and dreams look probably pretty good. But the pushback I give on people who, whenever they say that Xbox showcase was great, which they've been saying for the last 2 or 3 years, right? Ever since that apology tour began. So 2023, 2024, 2025, I've had my problems with those showcases because of the trying to figure out a way to say it without sounding entirely caustic, because I feel like Xbox has said things to us that they knew to not be true at points in the timeline when they had to have known that Starfield was going to be delayed, Forza was going to be delayed, that they weren't making the 12-month plan, and that I'm in a state right now, still to this date, where I'm not forgiving of that. And so my problem is, when you look at the Xbox showcases, it appears that they're fixing the problems or have fixed the problems with their production pipeline. What I don't have confidence in is that they're going to stick the landing with those things when they come out. And I feel that they're going to be pushed to when they come out in order to feed the subscription service. So again, this gets back to PlayStation. Does first party matter? First party matters. First party is clearly not impactful from a business perspective and from a market uptake perspective right now. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up some other comments here. Innate says, yeah, I bought the $100 edition of Forza Horizon 5, but didn't play Motorsport at all like that. It's a consistent hit or miss with them so far, and while Xbox is finally showing up, it's too late. Innate also mentions, so most people have either moved to PC for their games or are just willing to wait it out on a PlayStation 5 for a few of their games that interest them. And then mentions, I think their current lineup looks amazing on Game Pass, etc., but it's not going to get anyone to switch. So back to PlayStation. Again, I will admit, it's starting to sound a bit like the Xbox fan mantra of hopes and dreams. Sorry, mic arm. But we truly do expect that PlayStation is aware of the problem and intends to fix it. I mean, that's the other stark difference here to me is that I just feel like so many times in Xbox past history, the bathtub problem has been there, and there's just been this insistent willingness and desire and deliberateness to not believe it, to think that it's not a problem. I go back to one of the emails that came out during the hearings where it's May. It's literally a month before E3, right, or their big Summer Game Fest show. And Phil is sending an email to Sarah and Matt and at this point, Sarah isn't even president of Xbox, saying, "Hey, we don't have anything on the slate for the bottom half of the year. What's the plan?" And I'm like, to me, and this is going to sound a little caustic, I'm like, I have 3 VP level executives. How in the world is it even feasible that a CEO level officer doesn't understand what the outlook is for the bottom half of the year, and that the lieutenants under him don't have a plan for the slate? Like literally, that is not the only thing, but that is the core thing that those executives should be responsible for. And yet, in May of whatever year it was, 2022, there wasn't a plan, and the responses that came back from the email were all guesses and recommendations and suggestions. And I'm like, I can't imagine going to a person charged with that responsibility in my organization, who worked for me, and not hearing a succinct answer rattled off very quickly from memory, and walking away from that and not getting rid of that person. By contrast with PlayStation, like I said, brand equity, fashion brand, loyalty, whatever, there's a sense that they know that it's a problem and they know that they have to fix it. I don't know how to explain it any more than that. But I will say, I do think that for PlayStation, it's not do or die, but they do have to restore some loyalist goodwill in the closing years of this generation. And I will say, Xbox did a great job of that at the tail end of last generation. So when you look at Generation 8, all the things that they were doing in 2017, 18, 19, 20, this Rolling Thunder campaign to walk up into Generation 9, in my mind, were all the right choices. Game Pass, PC Game Pass, day and date, the acquisitions, they had me excited. In fact, I had not gotten onto Game Pass in the previous years because I was like, it's just going to cause me anxiety by like immediately exponentially expanding my backlog and making me aware of these games that now I feel like I'm obligated that I need to play. I mean, that's historically why I never played Morpigs, because I was like, if I pay $10 a month for something, I'm going to feel like I'm obligated to consume X amount of it, and I don't need that anxiety. But but I think Xbox, like I said, did all that well. It's when they said PC Game Pass and day and date, I was like, oh yeah, I'm turning this on now because I want to be in the pool before the next Xbox drops. So they did what they needed to do. I feel like PlayStation has maintained loyalty, but has lost some element of goodwill. And they're starting to show some shakiness around their foundations in terms of what fans' expectations are. They are riding through, to a certain extent, on their laurels in terms of people don't have a viable alternative right now. So then what does that look like for the next generation? But before I get to that, I'll reflect a little bit on just kind of, how I would personally feel right now if I were a console gamer. Right now, I'm a PC-only gamer. I transitioned to PC-only gamer in this generation because consoles weren't doing necessarily for me what they needed to do in opposition to the enjoyment I get out of PC. If I were a console-only gamer now, and in particular if I was on one platform other than Nintendo, I wouldn't be satisfied with this generation from either side. I would be hugely disappointed on the Xbox side, and that's just me personally, because unfortunately for Xbox, the first-party titles from Xbox are the reason I was on Xbox in the first place. When Xbox came into the fold, I was a big Sega fan, loyal as I had been my entire life. Xbox was my replacement for Sega when they decided to get out of the hardware business. All of those IP, those franchises that Xbox brought spoke to me at my core of what I like as a gamer. Halo, Gears of War, Forza, Motorsport, and Horizon. So everything that Xbox did was why I was on Xbox. And so my disappointment with them is admittedly greater because the things that I have wanted or did want from the brand weren't showing up, and weren't showing up like in a great state. When you talk about PlayStation, the only reason I had a PlayStation along with my Xbox was to have access to their first party titles, so I could play them along with the other stuff. But to be quite honest, the memories I have, and this is to me is a key when you're kind of running this litmus test, is playing games and the nostalgia that we feel for them and how they get woven into our psyche is really a matter of the memories. And so if you ever want to run a self-test, what you run is, what are the things that you remember? What are the things that give you that warm fuzzy and that comfort feeling? And admittedly, on PlayStation 4, while yes, there were tons of great first-party exclusives during that generation, what sticks with me in my head and my memory was playing tons of Far Cry 5 and playing tons of Destiny. When I bought my PlayStation 4 Pro, I bought the Destiny Collector's Edition. So to me, this is another reason why I kind of try to come around to understanding people's angst over first party, when my biggest memories of PlayStation 4 were third party. And then if I go back to PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 1, same thing, right? It was always kind of the third party stuff that showed up there that I have rooted in my memory. But to be quite honest, like I said, I wouldn't be overall in aggregate satisfied with either. To me, what this generation has spoken to is that there's more of an imperative now for the hardcore gamer to be on multiple platforms. Like, that 60% of people who own a PlayStation or an Xbox and a Nintendo Switch, like, I feel those numbers need to go up, because the only confidence I would have in giving a person a recommendation who's becoming a new gamer that they're going to achieve like the satisfaction that they'll want if they're going to dive deep is that they need to get multiple platforms. The calculus that presents to new customers or even current customers right now is that going into next generation, the remainder of this generation and going into next generation, if you want PlayStation first-party exclusives, you can only get them on PlayStation, on their console, on their hardware. If you want Xbox exclusives, you're also going to get them on PlayStation. Your Xbox first-party, I should say. Sorry, we agreed we were going to separate those terms. Those first-party games are coming to PlayStation. So how do I strategize my best opportunity to play all of the games that are of significance? I buy a PlayStation. And then when I talk about like now is the time to become a multi-platform gamer, again, you go back to what does that mean from a math perspective for consumers? We're looking at a Nintendo Switch 2 that's probably going to be $400. We're looking at a PlayStation 6 that, based on what has happened with the PlayStation 5 digital and the PlayStation Pro, I would probably expect that the PlayStation 6 baseline is going to be a $550 console, maybe $600. And then the next Xbox, what we're hearing is that this is probably going to be some type of hybridized thing that has access to Steam and Epic and is going to kind of be marketed and postured and positioned as a PC Lite solution. That's not going to be cheap. It's probably going to be, $700 to $850. And that may be okay because, again, even as Paris Lilly says, that thing is targeted for not your general consumer, but like your Uber Xbox faithful. He said the 30 million people who are on Xbox now. I don't even think it's those 30 million people, because a ton of those 30 million people are on the Series S and don't buy any games but play on Game Pass. So they're only going to be for your people who are multi-platform gamers now, right? Because they may look at it as an alternative to having an Xbox and a PC. And they may say, well, now I don't need both. I can have this hybrid, or that they have an Xbox and some other console. Now they may say, well, I can play the games on Xbox and I'll have access to these PC games so that my slate will be full. My point is, while I spiritually feel that like this generation has spoken to us and told us that now is the time to be a multi-platform gamer, I say that is a daunting perspective to have for people right now who can only afford to play on one console. They're being presented some choices that they may not be able to make. The other prediction I have that couples to that is that the next generation, we're going to compound and have this problem of getting people to convert and upgrade if the choices have a higher threshold shift baseline cost than they did this generation. So it's going to be tough. E-Nate says, I agree, PlayStation needs to step up. The fact that they are debating if they should have a showcase this summer or another state of play is insane. It shouldn't even be a debate. E-Nate, I haven't seen that being a debate. On DPS the other night, I think you were there, I kind of went over like the past history with Slow-Mo and Forte, and I mean, and show that like consistently what we've seen is we've seen state of play, we've seen typically 3 state of plays in a year, and then a showcase. Granted, I want to say they skipped 2000. They skipped 2 years over the last like 4 or 5 or something like that. So I don't know. It's hopefully they have something that they'll bring to the show. And then E8 also mentions PlayStation should be focused on maintaining the momentum of GTA 6, which means give one of your famous E3 level showcases and deliver what's on the current docket and look at 100 million. I mean, that's an option. I would say it's also an option to kind of hold birds in the bush and say GTA 6 is coming this year. That's going to give us an incredible boost to console sales. There's no need for us to fire rounds right out of the barrel because GTA 6 is already causing that momentum. What we need to do is wait. We're fine coasting now. People are going to buy PlayStations so that they can play GTA 6. That's already a foregone conclusion. Let's let that heat ramp up. Let GTA 6 drop. And then on the backside of GTA 6, let's start dropping more of our stuff in order to, as you say, maintain that momentum. Right now, I'm gonna hit this apogee, right, of consumer demand, and then let me feed that right as my heat, right, to take me into the next generation. So I don't know. As always, right, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But thanks so much for everybody joining in this morning. I had expectations that this show was going to be like an hour, so it's going on to an hour and a half. So I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for everybody who came through the live stream and the chat. Eat8, we appreciate you. Hero Down Under, we appreciate you. Paul's Gaming Live, I appreciate you. For anybody who wants to catch the archive version of this video on the Rounding Off Affinity Gaming channel, I appreciate you as well. Please feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you can just receive a notification whenever I next go live or drop new content. I intend to be live again tomorrow with a much shorter show. I kind of think about it as a mini tag. So that'll be the plan. I'm not exactly sure what time I'm going to do that, but it's probably going to be late evening. So probably 9, somewhere around 9 or 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So keep a lookout for that on Twitter or and on the channel. I will definitely, in fact, shortly after, like as soon as I get off the show, I'm gonna figure out when I'm gonna do that show, and then I'll have it, and then it'll be posted as the next live show on the YouTube channel. E8 mentions, I hope they don't wait on GTA 6 to release one or two more things. I just want them to set the time for after GTA 6. Yeah, I mean that would be a good way to play it too, right? Still do the showcase and maybe use that right as a starter flame for the GTA 6 heat, but then have the delivery dates for those dropping after GTA 6 to achieve that same thing that I talked about. Like, let that momentum pick up from GTA 6 and then carry it forward with your own stuff. So yeah, definitely viable options. So I think that's going to cover it. Until next time, I don't even remember my outro. Stay safe out there. Play the games that you like. Have a good time. Come here to talk to me about the games that you love. Once again, my name has been Game Logic from the Rounding Off Affinity Gaming channel on YouTube. One of the co-hosts of the Basement Radio Arcade podcast and the Damage Per Second podcast. Until next time, good night, good luck, and good gaming. That's going to do it for me. I'm out of here.